Welcome to our weekly show for the National Association of Independent Medical Practices. You can find us at NAIMP.org. NAIMP is an organization focused on helping independent medical practices become more successful by providing innovative discussions, networking with like-minded professionals, and opportunities for growth, education, and increased revenue. Check out our website today at naimp.org.
Hello, this is Shirley Crest-Dudley, your host, and welcome to our NAIMP podcast. I'd like to introduce you to our special guest speaker, Michael DiFrisco. Michael is the Chief Marketing Officer for the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, AACD. He is also the founder of HowToBranding.com and has more than 25 years of experience in helping businesses effectively connect with their target audiences through strategic level mission relevance, brand oversight, and efficiency in marketing communications. Mike is also the author of How to Craft a Radical Brand for Your Dental Practice. And radical branding is what he will be sharing with us today. And Mike, I'm excited and ready for your presentation.
Well, thanks, Shirley. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on this podcast today, and I'm excited to share this information about radical branding because I'm so passionate about it. I'm so passionate about especially healthcare and medical practices engaging in the exercise of branding to make their practice really stand out in their community. In fact, that's really what this is all about. I mean, for any medical practice to get noticed and patronized in today's oversaturated marketplace, it's just not enough anymore to blend in. Me Too-isms won't cut it, and fitting in, well, that's the sure road to obscurity. So you're either extraordinary or you're invisible, and what I like to call that is radical. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, and again, appreciate being here. So one of the things that I noticed as I deal with a lot of dentists because of my role here at the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, is that a lot of dentists and a lot of small businesses are unhappy with the results of their marketing. In fact, there's a statistic that says something like small businesses waste between $30 and $50 billion each year on ineffective marketing and advertising, and 90% of small businesses, which would include independent medical practices, report that they're dissatisfied with the results of their local advertising. And one of the reasons that is because they most often put the marketing cart before the branding horse. They don't have an idea of what they're about. They don't have an idea about how to take this wonderful inside reality that is their practice, that is their medical business, and reflect it in their outside perceptions. In other words, they've worked very hard on their clinical skills, on their customer service. They've worked with their team on maybe really efficient processes, but then they don't take that inside reality and push it outside to their target audiences. So one of the things that I've noticed in working with medical practices is that they haven't considered this strategic thing called branding. They jump right into their marketing and want to know if direct mail is effective and how can I get better results with my search engine marketing, and they worry about the tactics. But what they really need to worry about is their branding and how they stand out in the marketplace, and that's really what it's all about. So let me start with a quick story. A few years back, my wife and I relocated to a new home. But in order to make that move, we had to first sell our white elephant of a house. But it wasn't really a house. It was a converted stone church that had been built back in 1939 and converted to a home with living quarters and things like that. It was a really cool place to live, actually. It had 28-foot ceilings and, these big, beautiful windows, and it was a real blast to invite people over for parties because they thought it was a really neat kind of a home. But the big pain in the neck was it was 4,400 square feet, and when my kids started moving out, it became very clear that keeping this giant home was just not practical. And the other thing is that often our heating bills, we're up in Wisconsin, often our heating bills would exceed our mortgage payment. So it just wasn't a realistic place to live. So we decided that we were going to put the house on the market. But literally like every third house in our neighborhood was for sale. Had a for sale sign in front of it, and people had their homes on the market for a long time, and they were reducing their prices to get noticed, and it was into that environment that we went and listed our home. And we were sure it was just going to sit on the market and languish like all the other homes in our neighborhood. Well, within just a couple of days, we had people clamoring to see the home, and a few days after that, we had a solid offer, and we sold the house. And my wife and I looked back on that moment and that experience, and I truly believe that the reason that we were able to unload this home was because it was different. It stood out from all the rest of the homes in the neighborhood. It demanded attention. You had to go see it. So in a sea of similar offerings and price points, this church house was unique, and people were bound to look, and thankfully someone was intrigued enough to write an offer and then write a check. And that's what it's kind of like if you think about your medical practice in any given community. They just all blend in. And from the prospective patient's standpoint, medical practices, dental practices, whatever, they're commodities. What's different? Why should I look at this person over that person? So again, oversaturated marketplace. You could blend in. You could hang out your shingle and blend in and hope that people decide to pick your practice, or you could find a way to stand out. So radical branding is an acronym that I use for these 7 points. This is how I recommend you build your radical dental brand. It starts with relevance, making sure that people care about what you offer. It's about authenticity, being true to yourself and your strengths and your DNA. It's about differentiation, which is what I just talked about with our church house. It's about being iconic and being memorable through your imagery. We'll talk a little bit about that. The C in radical is the alignment of your character, your conduct, and your conversation. So making sure that who you are matches how you act, which matches your marketing and your messaging and your social spaces and in all your advertising. The A in radical, the second A in radical is audience, who it is you're targeting. It's not everybody in the world, or it shouldn't be. And the L is live it, and that's how to engage your team in the process of radical branding. So let's walk through those. Let's start with R right at the beginning. That is our relevance. And the important thing about being relevant is that people care about what it is you offer. They have to care. One example I like to use is if you had the best brown necktie store in the world, if people don't care about brown neckties, it won't matter. So it won't matter how good your skills are, how much schooling you have, how good your customer service is. People have to care. So you need to be offering meaningful and compelling things for people to find you relevant. So don't offer services. You need to be offering investable opportunities, because remember that your patients aren't interested in what you do. They're buying the results of what you offer. Okay? They're buying results. They're not buying what you do. Their return on investment is in improved emotional and social standing. That's what they get out of it, not what you offer, but what they need. So here's how we often talk about that. You might be familiar with the old saying, it's from like the Mad Men days of advertising, but sell the sizzle, not the steak, right? You've heard of that. Well, this is not just sales and marketing 101, but most people know that you're really supposed to sell benefits rather than features. But this is radical branding, so we have to push beyond the 1960s style. That's when the 60s and the 70s is when my dad had a dental practice in suburban Chicago. And back then, you didn't have to you didn't have to compete. You just hung out your shingle, and you hoped that your friends and your family and the people in the community would notice you, and they would patronize your practice, and hopefully they would tell others. But there was no such thing as being competitive or having a competitive advantage. Now, it's all about radical branding. So we're going to push that. We're going to push this idea of sell the sizzle, not the steak, a little bit more with radical branding, and that's how this works. So when you want to think about what you offer versus what your patients really need, think about this statement. It's not about what you offer, it's really about this. So let's look at some examples. It's not really about banking. They're not interested in banking. They don't care what a bank does. And it's not even about rates. It's really about freedom, financial freedom, right? So the famous one that I've heard a number of times is, hardware stores don't really sell drill bits and saw blades. They're selling holes and cuts. They're selling the results of what those drill bits and saw blades do. But I say push it further than that. What they're really selling is that feeling of accomplishment that you get when you do something with your hands, when you build something, when you complete something and fix something, that feeling of accomplishment. So that's what you're really selling, that social and emotional return on investment. That's what you're looking for. So again, because I work at the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, I talk to dentists about they're trying to offer their patients things like smile design or orthodontics or bonding or veneers. And really what they're not selling are those services. They're selling hope and self-confidence and happiness, and that's how they become relevant. That's how you can become more relevant to your target audience. So it's not about the product or the service. It's not even about what those products and services do. It's about how you make your patients feel. So that is how you remain relevant. So let's move on to the A in radical, and that is authenticity. Now, authenticity requires a brand to begin with the mind of the customer, the patient. So take a mental snapshot of your patients and see what your brand already stands for. What do they think you are? And then exploit that perception by staying authentic to it instead of trying to make them take some mental leap, because they won't. You have to be true to your own strengths, not someone else's, because people recognize when you're phony. So that's what authenticity is really about. Your idea, what you're selling, what you're offering, the services that you offer, have to be credible. And remember that your patients are going to think about every claim that you make. They're going to say, is this plausible? Is that true what this doctor or this healthcare professional is saying? And secondly, they're going to ask, is it plausible coming from you? So think about that and how you can remain authentic. And the reason that this is so important is because if you try to be something you're not, people will notice that. And the nice thing about that is that when you're yourself, you really have no competition. So to maintain your integrity, you must remain true to your own values. Keep it real. Keep it honest. Keep it genuine and sincere. Again, don't try to be something that you're not. Let's jump to the D. Now, it's a little bit about differentiation already. Really, being different is the base of create a preference. You need to create a preference for your patients and your prospects. They're going to be asking the question, why should I buy from this person instead of that person? And the nice thing about differentiation is you can control that chain of trust. You expect patients a reason to choose your practice. This is not the time, I think, to be subtle. That's why I call it radical branding. You want to really set yourself apart and be different in the arena. Being number one, being the best at something, having a true specialty, a true focus is one way to differentiate. I love the movie City Slickers. I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, but there's a great scene where Curly, the Jack Palance character, is talking to Bill Crystal, and he says, do you want to know what the secret of life is? And Billy Crystal says, yeah. And he said, it's this one thing, and he holds up his finger. And Billy Crystal says, your finger? And he says, no, it's this thing, whatever is most important to you. And that's really the key differentiation, is to understand what is most important to you, because that's part of your authenticity. That's your dominant selling idea, your brand promise, your brand essence. It's going to be the reason that people seek you out and choose your practice to do business with. So here's one way to do that. There's a lot of ways to position your practice, but you should always be positioning against the competition. So if the competition is zigging, you need to zag. And one of the constructs that I use to do that is to fill in this thought here. And that is that, especially for, and then who is your core user, who is your audience? We'll talk more about that with the second A in radical. What's your practice name? Is the best what? What do you do? What's your meaningful difference? And why is that important? What's that support phrase? If you can fill in that positioning construct and it's relevant and it's authentic, it'll start to build your differentiation factor. So that's one way to do it. Consider what makes your practice unique. Why should people support brand U instead of brand B? So zoom out, and when you can quickly and almost intuitively fill in a construct like this one that I'm showing here, you'll be well on your way to kind of understanding your radical brand. So let's talk about the I in radical. I stands for iconic, and this is kind of an interesting thing in medical practices because it doesn't seem like it should be that important. But iconic brands become icons with the help of consistent, memorable imagery. And sometimes these are known sometimes as visual hammers, but things that people remember visually, like the Marlboro Man. We remember that even from years ago that this cowboy represents the Marlboro brand. Probably not a good idea to talk about cigarettes with healthcare group, but that's just an example. So, kind of a cool story. The late Steve Jobs once said, "You know, you've baked a really lovely cake, but then you've used dog poop for frosting." He didn't actually say poop, but I will. The cake that Steve referred to in this example is your business, your practice, your medical practice. And the poop that Steve referred to is kind of the minimal attention that some businesses give to the outer layers, you know, those first points of contact with your business. And, you know, Steve loved doing things right. If you're an Apple person, a Macintosh person, if you have an iPhone, you know that the culture of the Apple brand is that they care about all the parts you don't see. You know, no detail is too small to care about. Well, I think what Steve thought was, if the stuff you can't see is important enough to refine, what about the stuff people do see, especially people first encountering your medical practice? So these outer layers, this frosting, are the first points of contact with your business, like your website, your signage, how you talk, the messaging that you use in social spaces, and a really iconic aspect is your logo. And again, in some medical fields, people might think, well, a logo's not important. I'll just use, you know, a caduceus or something like that. One of the things I do with my dental audiences is I challenge them to go and search on the term, do an image search on the term dental logo. And what they're going to see is about 95% of the dental logos out there are extracted teeth, a little tooth that's extracted, that's out of the jaw or out of the mouth. And they're predominantly, again, 90% blue. So if you want to be obscure, if you want to just fit in, if you want to be a Me Too business, have a blue extracted tooth for your logo. So icons are important. If you want to stand out, if you want to be different, it's important to be iconic. So you want to make sure that first impression that your prospective patients have of you is that it conveys your authority and it reflects your expertise, and that first impression, that iconography, those visual images that you use exceed the expectations of your patients and prospects. It's more important than you would think. So let's talk about the C in radical. The C is the alignment of your character, your conduct, and your conversation. In other words, making sure that who you are is aligned with how you and your team act, which in turn is aligned with what you say in your marketing, in communicating with patients and prospects, in your social spaces. You want to make sure that all these things are in alignment. So the best way that I like to describe that is with an arrow. So think about an arrow, and in order for that arrow to fly straight and true right to the bullseye of your target audience, by the way, that's the second A in radical, and that's coming up next, you need a straight and true shaft. And the shaft and the flights or the feathers that keep that arrow flying true are your radical brand's character, conduct, and conversation. All right? So you have that word picture in your head now. It's up there so that you can see it. So let's look at those important C's and what they mean to your practice. The character is, your business's character is what your patients know it is, what you offer, what you believe in, what it's made of. The character of your medical practice includes kind of those tangible characteristics, and in order to grow your business and build your radical brand, you need a solid character. So character is the personality of your brand, how it acts and looks, the way it's brought to life, the way you touch your patients at an emotional level. It's about becoming an entity that your clients want to identify with. Your conduct is how you behave. Your actions in the marketplace. Are you walking your talk, and is it really your talk? That's that authenticity point we talked about a little earlier. And finally, your conversation. What are you saying in the marketplace? What are your prospects and patients seeing and reading about you? What are they seeing in your advertising and other messages? Is it communicating something that's consistent and true to your character, aligned with what you say you are? So in order to hit that bullseye of your target audience with your dominant selling idea, which is that tip of the arrow, that differentiating factor, your character, conduct, and conversation needs to be in alignment. And back to my earlier point about putting the marketing cart before the branding horse. Your marketing is going to be useless. You're going to be throwing a lot of money away unless your entire organization is in sync with this character, conduct, and conversation thing. That's where that alignment is really important, when your entire practice is singing off the same song sheet, as it were. So character, conduct, and conversation, important to keep in alignment. One of my favorite examples is, recent examples is Jimmy John's. If you have a Jimmy John's sub shop in your area, they're all about this idea, this dominant selling idea, this differentiating factor of super speedy delivery. In fact, they say freaky fast delivery. And if you look at their character, they're really all about speed. And if you look at their conduct, how they actually make their sandwiches and their systems inside their shops, it's all about this idea of speed. And if you look at their marketing, all of their marketing, whether they're T-shirts or billboards or social spaces, are all about freaky fast. Everything's about speed, speed, speed. Character, conduct, and conversation always in alignment, and their employees, their shop owners know that intuitively. You want to make sure that everything you do is coordinated and consistent and contributes to delivering your focus. So that's what this is all about, character, conduct, and conversation in alignment. So the second A in radical is our audience. Now this is the target group of people who are your brand lovers. This is not about being all things to all people, but great brands, even medical brands, focus on a core group that actually attracts others to you via kind of a halo effect. So I encourage medical practices to position your practice really narrow, and that'll allow you to catch wide. Now this sounds kind of counterintuitive. The best marketers know that this is true. Position narrow and you'll actually attract more people. If you want to appeal to a wider audience, you have to position yourself in a very narrow and specific way. You want a core audience of brand lovers that's kind of inspirational to others. Nike shoes is a great example of this. It's pretty clear to everyone that Nike is a brand for high performance, highly competitive athletes, right? That they also know percent of its shoes are worn by, people like me, just often to go to the grocery store. So don't confuse your core customer with your target market, because they will attract more people to you. So that's the real paradox of positioning and finding an audience. The narrower your focus, the more you can be specific about what you offer, the wider your message will actually spread. It's actually a pretty cool thing. So how do you grow your audience? Well, who are your best patients today? What target segments make up the bulk of your clients? What do they like? What do they have in common? How do you find others like them? Where do they hang out? What do they read? How do you clone them? Do you have a referral program in place that helps you to proactively find others like them? This is how you grow your market with the people that you like to do business with the people that you like to treat. Finally, we go to the L in Radical, and that's for living it. So this means that you're aligning every customer touch point, every patient touch point, and business activity to reinforce your relevant differentiation. Because after all, the brand is the strategy. I find it interesting sometimes when I'm consulting with people that they want to build a brand, but then they want to have a strategy that lives over here. It's in a different place. But the brand is the strategy. That's how you differentiate yourself in the marketplace. So how consistently you present your healthcare brand will either strengthen your practice or weaken it, depending on how you and your staff live the brand. So understand that every patient's notion of your brand is formed from their first experience or imprint with your practice or your services. So every interaction, every touch point is a chance to enrich your Radical brand. And here's why it's so critical, especially in Radical branding, to kind of engage your staff, your key advisors, vendors, other stakeholders in embracing what you stand for. That's because most people want to be involved. They want to be able to explain and embrace the company's vision. They want to fit in. They want to know how they fit in to delivering that brand promise. Most employees want to be more effective. They want to be a spokesperson for your brand. And most employees say that being engaged in understanding the brand would help them talk more positively about the practice that they work for with others. So it's really important that you engage your team in this and that they can, again, sing off your song sheet. So they should be able to answer this question every day. How am I helping to deliver on the practice's Radical brand promise today? And they should be able to ask that question every day. So here's 6 quick rules about engaging your team about your Radical brand. First, be clear about what you want to communicate. Make sure you understand what your brand stands for, what it means to your staff before you try to educate anyone. Then make sure that your brand idea is really simple. Kind of capture the essence of your brand in shorthand. This is sometimes referred to as a brand driver, but your staff, your team needs to internalize it and act on it instinctively. They need to know this brand recipe by heart. So make it a simple recipe with just a few ingredients, and they'll be able to internalize it without consulting a cheat sheet or something like that. Your team needs to understand where they fit in and why it matters. I once worked for a company that the groundskeepers were really important because the brand was built on this idea of cleanliness. And so some of these groundskeepers kind of didn't understand why their quote-unquote menial jobs were so important to deliver that brand promise. But once they understood why it was important, all of a sudden their jobs became more important, and they appreciated their role in delivering that brand promise. The next rule is to think of brand engagement as not simply teaching your medical team a new language, but kind of a new culture a set of behaviors. And the best way to do this is through immersion, hearing, watching, learning, and doing. That'll give your team an innate sense of the brand and how you, as the practice owner, as the doctor, want to convey it. Next, manage the expectations, because changing behavior is sometimes challenging, especially across the whole team. So don't give people 50 things to do at once. Start with 4 or 5 specific behaviors that you feel will make a measurable difference. Then point to and celebrate success when it happens, and make it fun. Make it fun. A lot of practices do that. But your objective here is to kind of get to this team, aha, we get it. We know what our radical brand stands for and how we as team members can contribute to what it stands for with our clients and our patients. We know how to be the brand. So that's how you engage your team in that. So that's a little bit about radical branding. Again, I'm Mike DiFrisco, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. Love working here because the AACD, with its accreditation, gives dentists a chance to kind of earn an advanced credential and really differentiate themselves in the dental marketplace in their community. And you can find out more about AACD at aacd.com. And I do have a book called Radical Branding. It includes 22 do-it-yourself exercises. It is a dental book, but it would work for any medical practice. And you can find that by going to howtobranding.com/dental branding. And you need that .html at the end. But otherwise, that's radical branding. Shirley?
Well, Mike, thank you very much. Some good information, and I was taking notes. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. If you have questions, make sure you go to howtobranding.com. It's how-to-branding.com. And also, if you go to NAIMP.org, you can see the slides where you can look at the notes that Michael was talking about, the different slides, and also see the unusual church house that he mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So don't forget, go to NAIMP.org, sign up for our newsletter so that you'll know when each podcast comes out, and you can also see Michael's slides. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Check out our website today at naimp.org.